Well, hello and welcome to Producer Dan. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel today. Today I want to talk about 10 of my most favorite tips in Pro Tools. And the first one is folders, basic and routing folders. So let's take a look at this mix. I have all kinds of groups of instrument types. This is a large mix with orchestration and drums and vocals and all of this. And I've used quite a bit of my buses, and I was on the verge of running out of buses. And then I became aware of the routing folders, these folders that could act like buses, which really solves a problem. It's a really smart way to work. And I've done a couple already. These orange tracks are my brass tracks, and I've created a brass folder. When you press this folder, it condenses everything into this one fader. And here are my woodwinds. I can minimize that. My keys, that's pianos and pads, I'll minimize that. And these are percussion. So let's make a couple here. These red tracks are my strings. So I'll click here, and then I'll hold my shift key down. I'll click here, and then I'll right click. And in the menu, you'll have Move To. So we're going to create a new folder for the strings. And here's where you'll get the chance to make a routing folder or a basic folder. Let's make a basic folder just for example, and I'll call it strings. Okay, and we'll create. And it has put all of these tracks into this folder that I can minimize and maximize, but it doesn't have any mixing abilities or any of the bus abilities. It does have a solo button and a mute button. But this folder is not what I want. I want to have a bus type folder, a routing folder. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to select this track, hold my shift key down, select this track, right click, move to new folder, and I'm going to change this to a routing folder. And we want to make sure this is checked. Route tracks to new folder. And of course, we want to make sure it's stereo. And I'm going to name it strings folder. There we are. And you can see all my outputs have changed to the string folder. And here is my string folder. I want to make sure this string folder track is routed to my instrumental bus. So I'm going to click here, bus, and instrumental. And you can see I've color-coded all my buses, so it makes it very easy to find what I'm looking for. You can check out my use of color video. I'll have that linked in the description below. So we'll choose the instrument bus, stereo, and now my strings, along with all my other orchestration, is sent to my instrumental bus, and that is this bus here. So that's folders, your basic and your routing folders. Next, I want to talk about the 4 new marker lanes that they've placed in the edit window. They've given us 4 more marker lanes here at the top. You can see I have 2 showing, but there's 5 total that you can use now. And I think that's really good if you're doing like video work or cinematography. I covered this in my markers and memory locations as well, so I do a whole video on that. That'll be in the description below. I know I would never use all 5, so you right click here and you just uncheck or check the ones that you do want. So I'll leave this one up. I would suggest using this for window configurations. So that brings us to tip number 3, and that is creating a window configuration. It's very simple. Let's say there's a particular way I like my window to look when I mix. For example, if we go up to Window Configurations, I've got a few here. This one I just made, it's a mix plus half of the edit window. So if we click on that, my mix window and my edit window comes up. Now, a quick way to do this is to use the memory locations, and that's over here. Anything you do in your marker lanes will be listed here. So I'll put my cursor here, and you can target either your marker lanes or your tracks. You can also put markers on tracks like I've done here. But let's go ahead and put a marker here, and I'm going to call this WC Mix Edit. And I don't necessarily need it to make a marker, but I'll put it as a selection. So you can see, here are my window configurations listed here. This is the one that I want to choose, so I'll choose that. And I also want to make sure that my zoom settings, my track heights, and this window configuration, you can also put comments in here. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And now, over in my memory locations, you can see at the top, WC Mix Edit. So we've created a kind of a marker that will pull that back to your preferred mixing configuration anytime you want. And I'll demonstrate this. Let's say we zoom out and we zoom down and we go to a different part of the song. We're in the bridge now. If I want to start back to where I was and kind of pull everything back, it's very simple. Just go ahead and hit your window configuration marker. Again, let's go ahead and move things around to how we want them. Okay, let's say we prefer to mix like this. Go to Window Configuration, New Configuration. This is number 3. We can name this Edit Half Mix. And it will recall this window layout. And you can put comments here as well. We just go ahead and press OK. And let's say you didn't want to use your memory locations to call that back. It's very simple. Just go to Window, Configurations, and now we have this one. And now the one that we just made, this one. And so you can see how handy that would be. And that brings us to tip number 4, and that is the Edit Keyboard Focus button. And that's over here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. Over here in the edit window, up in the upper right-hand corner, this orange button, A to Z. When this is enabled, this enables you to use your keyboard shortcuts without needing to press the modifier like Command or Option or Control in most cases. For example, when this is enabled on my edit window, if I want to separate this, I just press B. I don't have to press Command B. I'll go ahead and undo that. In undo, I just press Z instead of Command Z. So you can see how that could be helpful. And if you ever have any problems with your shortcuts in your edit window here, just go ahead and make sure that that's enabled. Also, you have one of these in the clips list. You'll find one of these focus buttons here, and also in your groups list as well. And that brings us to tip number 5, and that's a detachable clips list. You can go ahead and press the separate window icon here, and that put your clips list in a separate window, and you can move that to a separate monitor. And that brings us to my next tips, tip number 6 and tip number 7, and they have to do with automation. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the automation I've done for this song. If you go over here to our track, right now it's showing the waveform, but I'll click on the volume. So you can see I've made significant automation moves on this vocal. How many times have we finished our mix and realized the entire vocal needs to either come up or come down? Rather than going through the whole thing and making minute changes, if you highlight the entire track, if we hold our command key down, now we can go in very small amounts. You can see the dB goes down by 1/10 every time I come down. So I brought this up because I do this all the time. I find myself making minute changes to the entire vocal. And so that's tip number 6. Tip number 7 is automating your plugins, automating your effects, your EQ. Most things, most virtual instruments or plugins can be automated. So for example, I'll click on this EQ. If we go to the Automation Enable button, click on that, you can see we have choices of all these parameters on the EQ that can be automated. And you can see I have brought over to the automation window the low pass enable and the low pass frequency knob. You highlight the thing that you want and you press add, and it'll move that over to the automation window. So let's press OK. So we'll come over here to the automation lane, low pass enable. You can see that I've enabled the low pass filter to kick on in this part of the song.
Here on this earth, folklore of fable.
And I did that because there's a slight hiss when she says earth, so I back down on those higher frequencies.
Here on this earth, folklore.
So it helps out a little bit with the hiss. But my point here is a lot of the plugins in Pro Tools have automation capability, if not all of them. All you need to do is look at the automation enable, and the list of parameters will be listed here. So that's something I just love to mention every time, because I don't know if everyone knows about that, or maybe they do, but I don't think they do it enough. I think it's something that we should all be doing, particularly with EQ in a dense mix. So that's tip number 7. So that brings us to tip number 8. And this is something that you probably all know, but just in case you don't, I think it's a good idea to put all of your plugins in the same slots. For example, here I have my EQs in this slot, and I have this compressor in this slot all the way across. Basically, I've made some exceptions here. Particularly with EQ, if you want it like A and B, you want to hear the song with the EQ and without, it's very simple to do that if they're all in the same row. So if I hold down Option Command and I click on this EQ, all of my EQs are bypassed in that row. So that's very common and something that you probably already know, but I wanted to include it anyway. Now, tip number 9, I've covered this in a different video, but it's something very cool. We can now search our preference tab, and you can search things like MIDI, and it will highlight in blue all of the different tabs that have the word MIDI. For example, here's display, editing, and of course MIDI. It's a very good thing to have now. I can't tell you how many times I've come to this preference window searching for particular things. It's just a long list of things to have to read, and sometimes you don't always find it. So I'm very happy about that, and that is my tip number 9. And that brings us to my 10th and final tip, and that is Retrospective Record. This feature is awesome, particularly if you're doing orchestration, if you're composing, if you're putting together a song with virtual instruments. This allows you to capture and record the very last MIDI notes that you played while the cursor was moving. Your cursor has to be moving, you have to be in play mode, and if you like what you played, you just press Option Shift Z. So I'll show you an example of that now. I'm down here at this sine wave. I'm using PlayCell. Actually, all of these tracks are PlayCell, and if you want to watch a video tutorial on PlayCell, you can check my description below where I go in depth on this instrument. But here we are. We have a sine wave, and I'll record something, and if I like it, we'll keep it. I'll demonstrate this for you now. So we just press play. Okay, and so I like that. So Option Shift Z, and there it is. And we'll play that back. And of course that needs to be quantized, and you can do that. But that is such a handy thing to get in the habit of doing as you're composing, writing a song, coming up with something with a virtual instrument for MIDI. This feature will increase your workflow by double. So again, that is Option Shift Z to recall the last MIDI notes that you played while you're in play mode. So those are my top 10 tips for Pro Tools. Thank you very much for stopping by the channel today. I hope you found something helpful in this video. Go ahead and check out my last video where I kind of cover all of my favorite new features within the last couple of years that they've added in Pro Tools. It's very informative, and it will lead you to other videos if you found something interesting there. Thank you very much for stopping by the channel today. Go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Take care.